Thanks, Perry. Whoa. Okay. Um, all right. So thank you, Perry. I'm Joanna, one of the fellow co-founders of Hive Family Collective. It's so great to see so many familiar faces. I have the honor of introducing Kenzie, and Kenzie is a great asset to our community. And you're all here for some great insight into prenatal and postpartum care for yourself. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart as a physical therapist. I think it is so important and vastly underutilized information in terms of how to take care of our bodies prenatally to help us postpartum, and then also how to safely return to activity postpartum. There are a lot of societal expectations that Kenzie and I have talked about that are really unrealistic and unsafe. And so we're here to find out the great tidbits about how to safely do it so you can have the longevity that you want returning to fitness. Kenzie herself is a mom of two, a 3 and 4-year-old. Her husband also teaches at the U with as a kinesiology instructor. So they are quite the pair. And so you can find her at Park City Fit. She will also give her information about how to contact her towards the end of her discussion. But she has a passion for women's health throughout pregnancy and postpartum. She's received her master's degree in exercise and sports science with an emphasis in wellness coaching. So what a great combo, and what a treat for us to have that. And also with her experience of having children 22 months apart and experiencing going through not only pregnancy, but also returning to exercise and how to do that safely, she can draw upon not only her clinical and professional experience, but also her personal experience. So thank you so much for joining us, Kenzie. And I am not going to take any more of your time because you have the goods tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. That was an awesome introduction. You put it into such good words. I feel empowered now. So I am so happy to be here. I'm going to start sharing my screen and get you guys right into some of the pieces that I wanted to talk about tonight. So what's really cool about training while pregnant is that there is so much that we can do right, and I'm excited to introduce that to you. So pulling up my screen share. Here we are, and we'll put it into our big view. All right, are we thumbs up and you guys can see it and we're good to go? Awesome. So training with intention during pregnancy and postpartum. What I want you guys to leave here tonight is feeling empowered to make decisions that are in line with your values. So while you're pregnant, I want you to feel that you can consciously make good choices that allow for postpartum intensity and postpartum fitness. Because oftentimes while we are pregnant, we think about get that healthy baby out. And what we often forget is get that healthy mama out. So wanting to be able to recognize that person on the other end of the baby's delivery. So kind of excited. So moving right into a couple of the talking points tonight. The first one that we'll talk about over the next little bit is the athlete brain. And I want you guys to recognize what the athlete brain is and have it work for you while you're pregnant and into this postpartum chapter. So the next one, we'll use our athlete brain to introduce the core connection breath and actually help you identify some pieces while you're pregnant that maybe are of concern or maybe positive, and that you could communicate with me or you could communicate with a pelvic floor specialist to really get value towards a healthy recovery postpartum. And then the last one is training with intention. So what can we do during our pregnancy for pelvic health and gaining confidence for that 4th trimester, so right after baby's delivery and postpartum. So first one up, there we go. How did I get here? So here's a photo of me pregnant with my first little one. She's almost 5 now, so Remington's in there. And Willem is 3. So as she mentioned, they're 22 months apart. And The way I trained during my first pregnancy versus my second pregnancy was significantly different. And I'll explain why, but even as a personal trainer and group fitness instructor with 7 years of experience, just hands on, and then even with my undergraduate work, I don't think I got it right my first pregnancy. So I did so many things because I wanted to prove that I could do them. So I still found myself CrossFitting and doing the things you think of: a pull up, double unders, box jumps, all of these explosive movements, and only modified a little bit. So when I got pregnant, I remember the doctor saying, "Yep, you do CrossFit. I want you to listen to your body. Keep doing the things you've already been doing. Don't learn a new sport, kind of continue on. And just if something doesn't feel right, maybe pause or modify." So that was my guidance. That's what I had that first pregnancy. And then during those 9 months, I proved it. I did it, right? I did double unders, I did box jumps, I did burpees. And the only modifications I made was I stopped using a barbell for a while because training a bar path around a pregnant belly didn't make sense. So I would use dumbbells. I avoided the rower because it was uncomfortable as I would pull back in. And I still avoid the rower because I don't love it. So that might have transferred over. But as I got bigger, I still kind of did the same things. And you'll see in a video in a moment that I allowed that to go all the way through till delivery day. So once I had Remington, it was like, okay, I had 3 hours of stage 2 labor, so active pushing, active contractions, me pushing those full 3 hours. And I delivered a very healthy baby girl, but I also suffered from a 4th-degree tear and was just in a lot of difficult situations in my pelvic floor, whether that was incontinence, urinary incontinence, or just recovering from that tear and having a full reparative surgery. So those first couple of weeks postpartum, I depended so much on my family, and I started to question my training, thinking, did my body fail me during this training? Did I was doing all the things that I saw social media people doing. I saw other CrossFit moms exercising. I saw them doing the same things, and that's what I identified with. So what were the pieces that went wrong? And what helped was once I got some more sleep and I had recovered and I started to find my way back to exercising and talking to other people, I also remembered I've got to get some continuing ed on this because I want to educate myself and I want to be able to educate others on some awesome stuff that they can do for themselves during this season of their life. So got my training, met with a pelvic floor specialist, and really honed in on what was my next step, if I wanted to get pregnant or not, or just overall recovery. So here is 2 days before my delivery with Remington. And now, and I'll show you guys the video, it's really short, but now that I can look at it with a trained eye, I can give suggestions to my former self and I can work with clients now and allow for, maybe they want that same stimulus, they want to do that same movement, but let's switch it up or modify it just slightly that encourages pelvic floor health and postpartum recovery. So the first movement you'll see me do is a squat clean thruster. And you can already tell that I had modified it by using dumbbells instead of a barbell, right? So in a moment, you'll see me moving through that movement. And at that time, I didn't feel any heaviness in my pelvic floor. So I continued to do that movement and it felt okay. The next one, though, is when I start doing some jumping rope. And watching this just makes me hurt because I think about the pressure pushing down and what I've learned now, right? But in my mind and in my ego, it was like, I can do this. I can still do these things. And look, and now with the proper I guess, empowerment underneath me. I'm like, okay, what could we do instead that would have given me that same stimulus? I could have hopped on the bike and done a little bit harder cardio piece, or I could do a plyo skier so it distributes my weight differently instead of the double feet down at the same time. So, a couple of things that I can look back now and recognize. The last movement is me doing a rope climb from the floor and pulling myself up, and you kind of miss the bottom. And thankfully, I didn't have any diastasis. I didn't have any coning in my core while I was pregnant, meaning I hadn't separated too much, that movement was okay. But as I got into that third trimester, or as my clients go from the second to third, I would start limiting their range of motion and looking at what's happening at their midline. Are they able to still get that pulling sensation, but maybe we adjust the range of motion? So those are just three things right there that I can look back on and say, okay, this is what I should have done, and now what could I help clients with? So you wonder, how did we, let's skip to the next one. How and why did I push myself through that first pregnancy? And this is what I want to introduce you to. This first topic is the athlete brain. So what's interesting here is that as humans, we identify with something. Maybe we identify as a working professional. We identify as a dog mom. We identify as a mountain biker. Whatever that is, there is ownership in that identity, right? And so as an athlete, we identify with it. We always want to have that in our brain because that's what drives us. Well, as an athlete, like I said, it's what our identity is, but it provides a routine. So while we're pregnant, we want to keep the same routine we had before pregnancy. We always went to the gym at one certain time. I always mountain bike. I always, whatever it might be, we want that routine to stay the same when we're pregnant, right? We don't want to shake the boat. And so we have that athlete brain of like, I'm just going to keep doing what I've always done. The next one that I kind of highlight with all three is our ego. I already spoke to this, and I imagine that some of you can speak to this as well. Well, I can ride that trail and it's never been a problem, and I've never fallen on it, and it's not too cardiovascularly hard for me. So I should be able to bike this once I'm still comfortable as I get bigger, right? Maybe I change as I get bigger in my pregnancy and I can't mountain bike as well, but you get the idea. So our ego takes over as I can still do that. We have self-worth from that. So as a personal trainer and a fitness instructor, I had self-worth showing what I could do while I was pregnant. It made me feel good, and I liked that, and I knew that I was capable of doing it. So the aftermath, so that after postpartum hasn't even come across my brain yet. So I'm still living in that same moment, nothing's changed. Competitive and ambitious. As athletes, we know what we can do. We get a little hungry. We want to keep the competitive nature going, right? And so we do something that maybe doesn't feel right, but we can still do it. So, and we're ambitious to finish that. Those go a little hand in hand with being stubborn and impatient. So as athletes, as competitive as I am, if somebody says, you shouldn't maybe do that, I'm stubborn. And of course I'm going to do it. My husband knows me very well. I'm very stubborn, so I'm going to do it. And as ambitious as we are of our goals, we're often impatient if they don't happen right away. And if we're looking at a society that shows postpartum and body after baby, we get impatient if ours doesn't look the same, right? So as athletes, we're motivated to put the work in, and we're driven for that healthy baby delivery and result. And we have been trained to ignore that voice inside of our head as athletes. So if you can think back, maybe you've had a nagging injury in your ankle or in your wrist, but you love what you're doing and it kind of is there when you bike or you ski, but you're just going to ignore it, right? It's fine. It's not that bad. I can do this. So we've been trained to ignore that voice that's like, maybe give it like 3 to 4 weeks of rest and recovery and find a different stimulus. So motivated and driven, we've thought about it. It's maybe come across our mind, but we're just going to push it out of the way because we are motivated and driven in this pregnancy. So those are the pieces of the athlete brain. But what can we take from that? So what I like to think with my clients, and I have a client in class with me now and often talk to her about, well, what's the risk versus reward of doing that specific movement that's programmed for the day, right? Is there a risk that you could have a pelvic floor injury afterwards because of pressure buildup? Or is the reward that, you're exercising and that feels good and that fuels you? So if you're one helpful tip is if you are thinking about something that maybe I should do this, or do you think I should do this mountain bike ride, or do you think I should do this? You probably already have your answer. If you can think about it being a question, you probably have your answer during pregnancy. Okay. And if you don't, there are so many resources to ask myself, a pelvic floor PT, any of those resources that, or your doctor, and say, is this going to be okay? Right? Because there is so much endorphins and positive feelings with exercise. And we want to hold on to it because that's our athlete brain, but we've got to figure out a way to still get that same stimulus from something else that isn't as risky. I hope that makes sense. So, touching on the social media comparison, I've brought it up a handful of times. And what's been helpful to talk about is that we are bombarded with information around us that tells us what we should look like, what exercises work for their pelvic floor, X, Y, and Z. But have we vetted those accounts? Have we vetted who is delivering that information and what they are delivering? How is that making you feel? So, in the postpartum phase or pregnancy phase, if you're finding yourself comparing to another mom, another person, and you don't feel good about yourself, if it's starting to diminish how you are feeling, then you might want to unfollow, or you might want to adjust who you are surrounding yourself with, because the positive influence and the positive support that aligns with your values is the end all goal. So vetting who you follow and checking in with how that makes you feel. Do you feel empowered, or are you comparing your experiences? So once we acknowledge this athlete brain, we can begin to work from the inside out and shift our goals during this season. So this pregnancy or this postpartum, we can use that as our guiding light. So the voice that we were trained to ignore, we've got to actually tune into it and touch base and see if it's going to connect the right wheels to our values. So we're going to introduce the core connection breath. And I'm so glad Kathy's here, our pelvic floor PT, because I know she and I have had the opportunity to talk about this back and forth, and it makes such a difference. I will say from pregnancy 1 to pregnancy 2, and I'll explain in a moment. So how can we use our athlete brain to cue our self towards a healthy pelvic floor? And once that, one of these is, or the core connection breath is kind of a self-check. So if I'm exercising and I'm unable to connect my breath with what's happening in my midline and my pelvic floor, then I might pause, I might adjust the load, or I might check in and say, that movement's not going to serve me the right way. So what do I mean? Let's take a look at the diagram there. So if you guys can see, our midline, right, has got some pieces there, and the top is our diaphragm. So when we inhale, we take a breath in, our diaphragm starts to lower, and that increases pressure in our abdominal wall. Okay, so that's your different abdominal muscles, your transverse and obliques. You've got some pressure in your spine, and if that is pressing down and pressure is increasing here, your pelvic floor is also getting pressure and coming down. Okay, and so what I will guide you through in a moment, we'll do 4 breaths together, is what's happening. Can we relax that pelvic floor? And when we exhale, that diaphragm starts to lift and our pelvic floor should come with it. Okay. Now, this seems interesting because when I first started with this, I didn't think about my breath and how it was connected to the different pieces. But between pregnancy 1 and pregnancy 2, this core connection breath was the difference of a 3-hour pushing actively to 19 minutes having no problem of actually knowing how to push a baby out. And it's the difference of relaxing your pelvic floor. Okay. So what I want you guys to do is I'll bring these little lines in, but I want you guys to close your eyes. So wherever you're at, hopefully you're not driving. If you're driving, then keep those open. I want you to close your eyes and we'll go through 3 breaths here. And when you inhale on this first one, allow your rib cage to open. Take a deep inhale in and touch base with what's happening in your pelvic floor. It should feel relaxed and your glutes should be relaxed. And as you exhale with pursed lips, blow your air out and feel that pelvic floor come up. And if you think about a string at the top of your head, as you exhale, that string is getting pulled and it's pulling the pelvic floor with it. Now, if you didn't feel that in your pelvic floor, maybe you felt your stomach sucking in and you felt your abs coming in, that's not our goal. So touch base again, take a deep inhale in, relaxing your pelvic floor. And on your exhale, pull up and in on your pelvic floor, bringing it up with that diaphragm. Doing one more here, inhaling, allowing your chest to expand, feeling that pressure pushing down. And as you exhale, the pressure is released and you're pulling up and in on your pelvic floor. So coming back to eyes open and what happened there and what you guys felt, we use this core connection breath for multiple pieces in our pregnancy and in our postpartum. So when we sync our core and pelvic floor together through breath, it stabilizes our core during strength training activities. So that's what I like to introduce to my clients who are pregnant while I'm training with them. I want to introduce that to them to figure out where they feel the most supported when doing strength training activities. So what's awesome about it is that during pregnancy, we get a baseline and then we get a maintenance part, right? Every training session, whether you're about to go bike riding, you're about to go hiking, running, weightlifting, whatever it is, if you can take 4 breaths to check in with your body and see and feel, do I have any underlying issues that might inhibit me doing intensity in this next exercise? And that's a good check-in for listening to that athlete brain and saying, okay, what can I do right now to adjust so I get the same stimulus and the same intention in our movement? During labor, and we are actively pushing a baby out, I found pregnancy 1, I had such an overactive pelvic floor that it was always overactive. And so the minute it released, I tore, I had pelvic floor or urinary incontinence. And so the second pregnancy, I had learned to connect with that breath. And so the push was actually pushing around my baby and having the opportunity to relax my pelvic floor instead of holding on thinking it was a workout, right? So, postpartum, if we connect to that breath, even within 24 hours of delivering our baby, it gives us a new baseline. We remember where we were, we know where we want to be, and we're going to take the right steps to get there. And it might take a little bit longer, it might be straight across, whatever it might be to get you back to that normal stasis. Okay. So, the connection to the pelvic floor, helps us in that postpartum to get set for working out with intensity later. Okay. It also gives us an idea of any symptoms we might have in terms of heaviness or pressure that could lead to pelvic floor incontinence or pelvic organ prolapse or various other items during pregnancy or postpartum.
Kenzie, can I offer two quick things just based on clinical experience working with this? Because I know that some of the participants might go home and try to work on this. And if you're having difficulty finding it, because again, the first couple breaths, sometimes people are just like, I don't know what's going on in my pelvic floor. Sometimes it helps to have a little bit of feedback. So there are these little like TheraBalls you can sit on that are kind of squishy, or you can like roll up a towel and sit on it. So you have some feedback under your pelvic floor vaginal area. And you can see when you're breathing, does your pelvic floor kind of sink into the towel? Does it lift up? And also just know, depending on the position of your pelvis, if your tailbone's tucked under, or if you're really arched, that can change things. So try to sit in kind of like a neutral spot, feet on the floor when you're trying this at home. And that was just something that I find working with women with their deep cores and trying to connect, that just gives you a little bit of extra feedback. Because when you're first trying to find it and you're not used to it, it's helpful to have some feedback. So
I love that. I fully agree with that. I think about the very beginning and not having any idea of how did I connect to my pelvic floor and what does that feel like and what does relaxed feel like. And you bring a good point too. You can try this in different positions. You can try this laying on your back. You can try standing position, but having a neutral spine and with our ribs stacked and just getting a good positioning to start. Because you may find if you've always stood like this and your pregnant belly is out, it's much harder to connect to that pelvic floor because it is disconnected. Everything's extended and our abdominal wall isn't able to fire at all because it's not in a neutral position. So thanks for that. I appreciate it. So coming back to training with intention, what I really like to do and work with clients with education is that this is a season, right? This is an opportunity for you to check out of your previous life for a moment and check into you and how you are feeling. So many of us are here because we want to continue to work out while we're pregnant. We want to get back on the saddle while we're postpartum. But then there's that fear of what if I do something wrong, right? Well, this is a season and this is a time for us to change gears and figure out a way that's going to provide us the same stimulus so that we can do the things we love postpartum. So with intentional movement, and what I mean by that is maybe a mom is saying, hey, I want to be able to pick up my kid, carry them in the car seat I have a super long driveway to the garage, whatever it is, but I don't feel strong in my upper body yet. So their goal while they're pregnant is to have strength in their upper body. Right? Doesn't mean we have to do pull-ups, we have to do all these crazy things. We can meet them where they are. We can meet you where you are, right? We can find movements that are going to bring to you the same stimulus that you want for later, right? That will transfer. So movements we do now, should complement our values and provide confidence in our postpartum. So if I know that I want to keep my cardiovascular system going while I'm pregnant, well, I love to run, but it just doesn't feel good on my pelvic floor as I run. What can I do to keep that cardiovascular component going, whether it's on a ski erg or it's walking with you already have a weighted vest, so you're going to get some cardiovascular pieces there, going uphill maybe, or biking. So we can still do things and transfer until we get to that postpartum phase and check in with our body and see how we're feeling. So the last part, training with intention for intensity later. So what I love and what I've learned from my mentors is that if I focus on what I'm doing now, the end game is there. The end game of seeing me on the other side. I lost myself a little bit postpartum with Remington. I couldn't identify with the athlete I was before. I couldn't identify with my other trainers. All of them were male. They couldn't speak to this either. And so the second pregnancy, it was really like, I'm going to focus on seeing me on the other side by doing the stuff that I love to do that will complement me for a healthy pregnancy. So I like to mention to my clients while they're pregnant, getting plenty of sleep, eating nutritious food, and surrounding yourself with supportive relationships and social interactions. So this goes back to the social media influence. If you think about the times that you're up late night with baby, with feedings, lack of sleep, and all of those brain waves that you're just exhausted from, but you're getting so much bombardment from social media because it's in your back pocket, switch that off and try to surround yourself by people that are doing the same stuff that you love to do, that are actively complementing your journey, right? It's supporting your values and where you feel you have the most confidence. So this leads to the ultimate, a healthy pregnancy and a healthy recovery postpartum. And the fear of, what did I just do with a pregnancy? And now here I am postpartum. I want to transition clients from that pregnancy to, okay, we're just going to take a step in a different direction. We'll slow our pace down in this postpartum window, and we will just start with that connected breath. We will just start to find our baseline there, and we'll take the next 4 to 6 weeks rediscovering ourselves and what we want for this chapter in our life. And that could just be, hey, I brought little Mackenzie, so that's Michelle's daughter who she was pushing in the stroller. I brought Mackenzie with me because that was the only way I could get out of the house today. I don't know how it's going to go, but we're going to work out together. That's great, because that comes back to your mindset of routine from that athlete brain, of identity, which you're getting back to identifying with who you are and what you want to identify with. And now you have this bonus of a little person joining you that you get to share this experience with. So where can you find me, and how can you learn more of what those next steps are, or what your goals might be? Because I think about postpartum as forever. Once you've had a baby, you are in that postpartum forever, right? You have done that work. And so whether you are really fresh, within a couple of years, or you are later in your kids are 15, 16, and you're in class and you're like, oh, I just peed a little bit on that. There is still work that we can do now for a healthy mindset and a healthy pelvic floor, which is really cool, because I think the empowerment I got with having Willem and knowing how confident I felt postpartum there, because I checked myself from that first pregnancy of what happened and where can I switch gears? Where can I get into a better mindset and better space? So you can find me at Spark, which is within CrossFit Park City / Park City Fit. We've had a couple of name changes, but I am there Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10:30 a.m. and then Saturdays at 8 a.m. I offer personal training. I have a handful of clients that are either pregnant or postpartum right now. And I also have a handful of clients in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, which is really cool because I still have them do their connected breath. I still work with them on engaging that through multiple different movements. We are moving spaces. The gym is moving spaces, hopefully this fall, looking at August. And when that happens, I'm going to provide quarterly pregnant and postpartum classes that would allow you to come in that season. They'll be 4 to 6 weeks long. You'll connect with other moms. They'll be at different parts of their pregnancies or postpartum, but it gives a space for you to train and see where you are and where you want to be for you and your ultimate goals, which is really cool. On Instagram, that's my Train Park City handle, and then my email there. So I want to open it up to questions and ask you guys if there's anything I left out or would like me to speak more to.
Thank you so much, Kenzie. That was so informative.
You're welcome.
I am on the postpartum forever train because, I have teenagers. I teach childbirth though, so I'm really interested in your connection with the pelvic floor and pushing. Well, I know that. I was wondering, is there something when you're training and you're breathing, or I teach yoga and I think about the pelvic floor and being in touch with it. I think that is really helpful. But beyond that, what's like some verbiage that I could pass along to students in a classroom, not in a workout setting, in terms of preparation for, pushing or being in touch with their pelvic floor as it relates to your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sarah. So if I hear you right, you're asking what could you relate to your clients and that helps them connect between maybe some strength training and then going into labor. Mm-hmm. So what I like to talk to clients about is finding the opposite ends. So finding our pelvic floor in a contracted phase and the most supported phase, and finding our pelvic floor in the most relaxed phase and unsupported phase. So if I was talking to a class, I would say things like, I want you to find your strongest point, and then I want you to find your weakest point. And to be able to flip-flop between those with control is where we're going. So if I'm strength training with a client and they don't feel, maybe they're doing a squat and they are coming down into the bottom and they don't feel supported at all, that's where that cue would say, you know what? Our pelvic floor can't handle this load, or it's not ready for this at the moment. So come back out of it. Let's reset, find the strongest point, find the weakest point in your pelvic floor, and with control, go back and forth. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. And then will that translates when they're in labor and they're pushing, that they're able to, breathe through their core and
so my thought is that they're in labor and they are having these contractions. And I from personal experience, and then now as I work with more clients, it was always that push, push, push and too much contraction versus the control of being able to relax and actually allow the pelvic floor to open. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. That's really interesting to me. Thank you.
Yeah. So the three things that we talked about, the athlete brain, the core connection breath, and then training with intention, our goal leaving this meeting was to be able to feel empowered to make decisions during this time, right? Make a decision during your pregnancy or postpartum for your values and what you want in the long run. So if there's anything that's open-ended that you don't see the connection, let me know, because I'm happy to discuss it further.
I think, Kenzie, what you just said about, oh gosh, sorry. Just and how, after we have a baby, so often we're expected to just pop back and not only just be able to train as if we never had a baby, or be able to have a schedule as if we never had a baby. And, there's just so many expectations as a parent and as a mother, that you're just supposed to go back to who you were, and you're supposed to train how you did before. And so I just think, how you've expressed that and how you are teaching women how to train differently, because even after baby, like, you may be able to get back to a certain place where you were previously, but you're not ever going to be fully back. I feel like, at least personally, I was a ski racer myself, so I just feel like I like your messaging around making sure that, we accept our bodies and accept the fact that it's okay that we're different. Like, our lives are totally changed. So going back to how we were before is a good way to accept that. So
I think what's helpful too is that I fully believe in, I would love to be strong and I want the strength underneath me, but shifting gears in my mindset of pre-baby body and post-baby body, you've gone through something absolutely incredible, right? And now you are rebuilding and your organs are shifting back into place, and we're getting to this new spot that having the confidence of just saying, I want to be strong and healthy in this season, and find out down the road for intensity and seek that intensity is our goal, right? Is just working with intention now so that we do get that intensity later. I mean, there's nothing wrong to feel good in your skin, right? Like, looking good, I'm all for it. So how can we get to that point the healthiest way? Liza, did you have a question? Did you unmute for a second?
Hi.
Hi.
Well, now that I think about it, it was probably during pregnancy, but really recognizing now postpartum, like my spinal and my pelvic tilt from carrying a baby, and really, well, one, not doing the conscious breathing, but also just kind of when it got so heavy, I just let my whole back tilt and let the baby kind of be baby forward.
Yep.
So now that's my natural positioning. And so trying to go back and think like, okay, what are exercises now that can focus specifically on my pelvic tilt to kind of reshift it back to a more neutral position? But it sounds like going back to simplify and just working on the core strength and the breath is like the best place to start, rather than saying, well, what movement should I be doing? What should I, what functional thing should I be training for? It sounds like it's like, let's go back to the simple breath. If I can't even find both ends of my pelvic floor right now, that seems like the direction that I should be focusing on.
And you know what, Liza, you brought up a good point, because that's your athlete brain of what can I do? You're ambitious, you're driven, you want to do the exercises that'll get you right there, because we often skip the fundamental first step. And that's the core connected breath, right? That's us breathing during our pregnancy to find our baseline, and then postpartum. So you bring a really good point of just starting there. And then once you've got that connection back, if you want further, you can always seek out vetted individuals, myself and pelvic floor PTs, to go from there to figure out your proper alignment.
Thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else?
What would you say would be like one of the most common mistakes or most common issues that you see of pregnant women coming either to train with you or beyond just trying to do, what they did before and not really training with intention, but what would you say are some of the like red flags or most common things that you see?
Sure, good question. So, a couple of things that I often notice is the skipping ahead. Oh, yeah, no, I know how to squat. I can just go right to the next part, maybe with load or X, Y, and Z. And what Liza brought up of the fundamental part is almost retraining with a pregnant body, right? As we get bigger, our body and our spine shifts, and how we stand and how we deliver our posture can actually change. And so what we want to do is bring our clients back to, okay, let's find the fundamental. What does stacked ribs look like? Even though you've done weight overhead, why don't we try it with sitting? Why don't we try it where you're leaned forward a little bit more? How does that make you feel? So I often see clients come in that just want to skip steps because it's hard to come back to the fundamentals. So that would be one thing I notice often. And then the other thing is new mom versus second pregnancy, learning that I have to train again. I have to go through this whole thing all over again and deliver a baby and get my body back. And so that can be the hardest shift because they've already done it before. And it's that fear going into the second one of how hard that was for the first time for them. And so acknowledging their fear, acknowledging the anxiety around it, and then switching gears and mindset thinking, okay, what can I do during this time so that postpartum is consistent, it's routine, and it's a breeze. So acknowledging how they feel in that moment. Did that answer it for you? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So anything else I can touch base on, or you guys?
Question just about fitness in general for women.
Yeah.
I heard along the way the importance of weights, in addition to cardio and
Training.
if there was like enough time in the day, we would do all 5 things. But tell me a little bit what you know or think about, as we grow, as postpartum and then through menopause and, growing up as women,
Yeah.
what do you see as optimal, exercise?
Sure. So it's interesting you bring that up because I was just talking to my husband about a new client and saying how she's probably in her 40s, and she was talking about in 8th grade, I did a strength training class and I remember all these awesome things, but I don't remember any of it now. And I haven't done strength training since. And so in general, women don't have a lot of exposure to strength training because in high school, it was always what the boys did. It's always what the sports teams did. And so as we age, since we've never done it, it's really hard to start, right? It's really hard to incorporate some resistance training. So I'm encourage as we age that we get at least 2 days of resistance training in. And that can honestly just look like body weight work to start and then increase some loading, because we want our bone density to stay as high as it can for as long as it can. Because in general, as we age with women, our bone density levels start to drop off a little bit. So if we can nip that and start introducing load at younger ages, whether we have a great program at the gym right now called Move Strength and Conditioning, which is for youth. And girls and boys come in there and they're lifting weights with really good technique, because that's the key. And the hope is that when they get out of high school and they're on their own, they know how to do all this stuff when they get into the gym, right? That's really cool. Instead of walking into the gym and being like, I don't know what that piece of equipment for. Why would I use it? What is that for? So introducing it at a young age, and then having the confidence when we're older to say, I think I need to do this. who can I go to? Right? The client that I just started with, she does Pilates. And I said, you're strength training now 100% with Pilates, but now we can incorporate a little bit more resistance with weights and loading. So, oh, you're muted. There you are.
Like, at what age do you start losing bone density? Or does it happen gradually, like our whole lives?
You know, that's a good question. And I would have to consult with my husband. Thank gosh, that's one of the classes he teaches, which is aging and exercise. So I'd be happy to respond to that at your time and let you know, because I think as we go through menopause, what's that?
No, I was just making fun of myself. I was just curious if it was like 47, which is
specifically 47. But as we go through menopause and we start to, our hormones start to change and shift, that's when I know there's more significant, more important time to start loading during that time and then beyond.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Kenzie, for such an amazing presentation and personal experience. We really loved, seeing you go through it, but also just what motivated you to become an expert in the field and be able to help navigate this, uncertain season for so many other people, because it is just so challenging to know what to do, when to do it. So we're really grateful to have you as a resource here in our community.
Thank you. I think what's interesting too is Park City is so active. I mean, we have so many opportunities to get outside and play and use our fitness that when we're pregnant and postpartum, it's almost like, wait, but where do I go to now? And what do I do? Do I just keep doing what I always do? Or is there a resource or specific training that I can do now that'll help me in the long run? So hopefully there's that connection now of there are resources out there that'll help build that to get you back to the things that you are so surrounded by in this community.
Definitely.
I love that. I don't know. It is so mental. I think so much of it also is just that like self-compassion that like we don't, we are not the same, and we're growing a human being, and then we're like keeping it alive. Like
I mean, the first year birthday is like, I did it. I kept him alive. I know we've all been there of like, okay. So yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining. And again, thank you, Kenzie. And we look forward to training with intention with going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so
everyone.
much. Thank you. Happy summer.
Happy summer.
Enjoy.